I'm very pleased to have Wolfgang Kandek tell us about one of these laws of vulnerability that we've researched in the previous videocast, and this one is on the half-life. Wolfgang, can you tell us a lot more about half-life?
Sure, Ben. Half-life is a measure that we've come up with to see how vulnerabilities develop over time. And half-life basically defines how vulnerabilities diminish. And in 2004, when we first did this, we came up with a half-life number of roughly 30 days for vulnerability to become 50% less. So as an example, if you detected 1,000 vulnerabilities of this type on a certain day, 30 days later, you would expect to have only 500. Another 30 days later, you would expect to only have 250 of these vulnerabilities.
Now, is that in the world or in my company?
Our data...
I want to kill it today, tomorrow in my company. I don't want even to have a half-life in my company.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, our data that we look at is not company-specific. We have our customers do those vulnerability scans, and we only get summary data out of it. So the data that I have access to does not tell me whether it's in your company. I have industry information, so I can say in the finance industries, vulnerabilities behave slightly different from the manufacturing industry, for example. And that was part of the findings that we had for 2008, that while the overall interval is kept at 30 days, some industries performed significantly better. So, for example, finance was at 23 days. The health insurance companies are on 24 days. And manufacturing was at 51 days. So manufacturing was significantly worse in their performance than the average.
Now, when we talk about performance and performance half-life, are we talking about the way that they detect and remove the vulnerabilities? Or what are we talking about? How long these vulnerabilities are still around on the net?
Exactly. So what we detect is the vulnerability still there? So indirectly, that means how do I correct that vulnerability? Mostly it's through patching, but people might also deploy other aspects like an IPS system or update their IPS systems. So what we're really looking at here is how quickly do people take care of vulnerabilities? And I think the secondary aspect that comes in here is exploitation. Because why would I want to take care of vulnerabilities? Well, because attackers analyze vulnerabilities when they come out and write an exploit, and then potentially that exploit uses that flaw that you have not patched or not taken care of, and then controls your machine, is able to shut down the machine, look through the content of your hard drive, potentially retrieve information that you have on there, key logging, you're logging into bank accounts or into your email accounts and things like that that can happen.
So, and in fact, actually, when you were talking just now, it just made me think that when the bad guys have a report from a vulnerability, they may not even look to use that vulnerability to exploit, but other vulnerabilities they found from that report. So that's how they can evolve their, if you like, their attack on your specific systems further. I don't suppose you picked that up in your research, but...
I think attackers, I think there's different attack modes. Most attackers that we know about just go for the bulk. So when new vulnerabilities are released, let's say Microsoft does that every second Tuesday in a month, they analyze them.
You mean patches?
Absolutely. Okay. Microsoft releases patches for vulnerabilities. We kind of tend to think about that they release vulnerabilities, which they did long before. The vulnerability was put in before they released the patch.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. When they release their patches, the attackers take the patched version of the operating system or of the application, and they analyze the differences. So they want to detect what was the vulnerability and is it usable in any way or fashion. And then they craft an attack code, an exploit, and sometimes that is very easy, and they kind of weaponize it in a way that it becomes a worm. So we saw that with Configure, for example, famous worm recently here in the Windows world. The vulnerability was detected in September, and there's word out that you could buy the vulnerability in China for roughly $40 at the time. Microsoft then released the patch for the vulnerability in late October because they were aware that somebody was working on a what we call weaponized version of that vulnerability, something that propagates by itself and becomes a worm. And sure enough, in November, we had first configure sightings. And today we have, I don't know, 2 million machines exploited. Some people think it's 10 million machines that are under control of an attacker that we still do not know where they are. We do not know who they are, and we do not know their intentions. They've recently started using those machines to install ransomware on some machines, but it's not really clear what the purpose of the net is. But it's certainly a very big one, and
Sure.
they could make all kinds of usages of that infrastructure.
So, you know, we've got the half-life for the finance or the health industry as roughly 24. Is it 24 days
24 days,
on average?
that's right, yeah.
Really, what are we trying to do? Reduce this half-life to 2 days, 3 days, a day?
Ideally, I think you would want to do that because in the recent patch release of Microsoft, to take that as an example again, there were 21 patches in there. For 10 of them, there were already exploits known, which something that we call zero-day vulnerabilities. So that window that you have to bring your machines into a healthy state is constantly shrinking. So 30 days is certainly too long. 23 days is better. Single days would actually what I would like to see, and I think we have the tools to do it. It's a matter of attention, basically, that we're missing here.
Okay, so the goal of corporations is to reduce this half-life to maybe just 1 or 2 days, but I actually feel that's quite almost impossible with the patching mechanisms that we have today and the procedures that we have to go through in terms of ensuring that these patches don't conflict with other applications and blah, 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 blah. But what's your perspective on that?
Well, I agree with you actually that today the way we set up that is a very challenging goal to get to. So I believe we need to significantly change that and try to be more streamlined in there. I believe that it's unnecessary to verify the validity of certain patches. I don't want to say that when you patch a server that you should not test that, but at least in the desktop space, I believe that the majority of patches should just be applied. I think, for example, browsers are a constant attack vector that we have today. People browse all kinds of websites and catch viruses that way and bring them in there. So I think browsers should have a particular focus in terms of patching them quickly. So I would actually suggest that corporations partition their machines into fast sets and slow sets in order to be able to apply these patches on a much quicker basis. If you look at Firefox, for example, they've actually included patching, so to speak, inside the product, and the product virtually constantly checks for new versions and very aggressively prompts you to update itself because they've realized that this is a very important feature.
Yeah.
Microsoft could certainly do something like that on Internet Explorer as well. I think it would be of benefit for the community overall.
Hello everyone, my name is Ben Chai. I'm the editor for SecurityVibes.com. If you've enjoyed this video or have any other comments to make, please do fill in the comment boxes and let us know what you think. Thank you.